when I was really struggling in the workplace. I trained as a careers advisor. It sounds maybe soppy, but this is who I am, to help people. That was my mission, to help people. And when I was working in schools, I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to be in this career for forever. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be within an education setting. But then I was made redundant. And then later on, I faced a lot of challenges in my life. I was going through anxiety and depression quite a lot, on and off, and I just kept on ignoring it. I wasn't talking about it a lot. In hindsight, we all do things that we learn from. We all make mistakes as part of life. And I thought, oh yeah, I can still carry on with my business. But I met an amazing business coach who really, really said to me, look, Soma, you need to be able to stand out. You need to be able to have something which people can have an alignment with. And the universe, although it was a really tricky period in my life, handed me something that was going to be a big learning curve.
Hello, I'm Nicole and welcome to this week's episode of the Big Chat. And I am very excited about this chat because we've had a couple of weeks off. I say a couple of weeks off. We were on the Local and Live podcast, Giles, Paley Phillips and myself, chatting to some interesting acts recently. And we did that, which was great. We did the Big Chat takeover. But we then had a little bit of a week off and we were talking to lots of people. And we thought, what better way to come back on with our local community business podcast than to talk to someone who's really an expert in their field, talking about all things career and happiness, which is certainly something that I'm a great advocate of. I think the two can go hand in hand if possible. So I'm really excited to introduce you all today to a lovely lady who I've got with me today called Soma Ghosh. Is that right? Did I say it right, Soma?
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Soma.
Hey, everybody.
How are you doing today?
I'm all right, thank you. There's always a bit manic on Mondays, but all good.
Now you're not local to Tunbridge Wells, are you? Where are you based? You don't have to tell people. You can.
I'm based in Northwest London, Harrow.
Yeah.
So not far, but
not far. But we do like to obviously have guests on that are going to be interesting to talk to about subjects that are going to be relevant to the community. And so we were really excited when Big Chat podcast producer Giles Paley Phillips, he was like, "You've got to talk to this lady. Got to talk to her." So got Giles to thank for connecting us today. You do have your own podcast as well, don't you, Soma?
Yes, I do have my own podcast. We're at 101 episodes with my podcast, which I'm really proud of. But I do, yeah.
So, for those that don't know anything about you, you're known as the website certainly is the Career Happiness Mentor.
Yes.
Would you like to tell people listening today a bit more about what that means? About, not just career happiness, but who you are and what you do to help people, Soma?
Yeah, so obviously my name is Soma and I'm a careers advisor. I used to previously work in schools and colleges. And weirdly enough, I will be in alignment with my business, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Going back one day a week, helping young people with careers advice in schools. The business itself, the Career Happiness Mentor, came about, Nicole, when I was really struggling in the workplace. I trained as a careers advisor. It sounds maybe soppy, but this is who I am, to help people. That was my mission, to help people. And when I was working in schools, I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to be in this career for forever. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be within an education setting. But then I was made redundant. And then later on, I faced a lot of challenges in my life. One of those challenges being I was going through anxiety and depression quite a lot, on and off, and I just kept on ignoring it. I wasn't talking about it a lot. And actually, I ended up leaving a job. I got married, moved to the other side of London. I was living in East London, moved to Northwest London. And to cut a long story short, the business started in a way where it had no structure, if I can be honest. It wasn't anything that particularly had a niche or had a client base. But after a while, what happened is I actually ended up going back to careers advice work in schools full time, which in hindsight, we all do things that we learn from. We all make mistakes as part of life. And I thought, oh yeah, I can still carry on with my business. But I met an amazing business coach who really, really said to me, look, Soma, you need to be able to stand out. You need to be able to have something which people can have an alignment with. And the universe, although it was a really tricky period in my life, handed me something that was going to be a big learning curve, Nicole. I was working in a very toxic work environment where I was being bullied quite heavily by somebody, to the point where, again, the anxiety and depression came, but it was a lot worse. I actually lost who I was. A lot of people would say now I'm very confident and bubbly, but I lost that person. That person is not the person that you see here today. I isolated myself from my friends. So we came up with the Career Happiness Mentor because we were finding that women, professional women at work, who were in very kind of corporate environments, but even in education and other environments, none of them were happy at work. So when I was working with Lucy, we were coming up with strategies of how can we bring the careers advice to people and work with them. And I've had my business for 5 years now. And in that time, what I've seen, Nicole, is that I was actually hiding from the careers advice. A lot of the time I was trying to do career coaching. And that isn't me. I do elements of coaching in my work, but I realized actually this is what people want from me. They want me to help young people, but they also want me to work with professional women. So now I'm in a place where I work with adults, so professional women who are unhappy at work, going through burnout, bullying, all those things. But I also work with parents of teenagers who aren't getting the support they need in schools. So that's kind of how the business has evolved within the 5 years, and the podcast started in 2019 because I wanted to do something where I was being unique as a brown woman, because there aren't that many people like myself doing what I'm doing, I guess. And I always try to do things a bit uniquely. So I've always been like that, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. And I interesting on your website, there was a lot of language that you use that resonates with me, sort of, voice to be heard and thriving. And there's a lot of language that we use ourselves here, actually. And I think for me, I'm 46. When I was back in my teens, we had like a career. We were even talking about this, I think, on a previous podcast, where you'd sort of have this career advice, place that you go. It was like a hub. Is it in my local town? It was in Tunbridge. You go to this place when you're at school, and you go in this place, and they sort of like put information into whatever it was then, probably not a laptop, that's for sure, but it was, almost like a system, which was like, you can do this. And then out of that sort of spurted, oh, you can work in a bank, or you can do this, or you can do that. And there weren't as many opportunities, or certainly we didn't think there was as many opportunities back then as we do now. And that's interesting when we talk to entrepreneurs, because when we talk to entrepreneurs, it's the sky's the limit. But that doesn't mean we don't need advice. And especially for the youth of today, like you're saying, or parents of, it's hard because they go after the glossy things and they're not given enough advice. And it's important years that we only realize when we get to our age, that we look back and go, oh God, if only I'd had this information then. So that's phenomenal of what you're doing. Looking at your sort of looking at everything that you do as well, you really talk about mental and physical health. And that's something that you work on with people as well. And that's certainly something through lockdown people have become more aware of, haven't they? How that's intrinsically linked. Talk a bit about that, what your experience of that has been.
It's been really, really interesting because I've had, and I hope this is okay to share here, because I've had quite a lot of challenges myself this year.
Share away. If you're happy to share, I'm happy to listen.
Well, it'll be insightful for entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast, and very important because I've been doing a lot of campaigning on LinkedIn for this as well, just to help other business owners, because that's just who I am. Back in June last year, things were going very nicely with my business. People were reaching out, they needed help. But then something happened in my business where I was hacked online. And sadly, I actually lost access to my Facebook and Instagram accounts. And as a result of that, I had to realign my business, Nicole. When I mean realign, I had to show up in a way where I realized I can't just give up. I've worked for it for 4 years now. At that point, it was 4 years. What do I do? So I realized that I needed to not just incorporate the careers advice, I need to talk about the mental health stuff, be vulnerable. And what I was finding is between that period when I decided to talk about it a little bit more, I had kind of been sharing, but I hadn't been sharing about the fact that I lost my dad when I was quite young, and grief has been coming up a lot over the last 18 months, as we all know. So that's something where I've been attracting some professional women, some clients, been, going through grief process. But also I've been finding that a lot of people, we've got this thing at the moment, Nicole, I don't know if you've heard about it. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it because I'm quite opinionated, but in a good way, called the big shift, the big reset, the big resignation. So what that means is a lot of people are opting to leave their jobs to either start a portfolio career, set up a business, or do something completely different. And why this is linked to mental health is because people have been realizing whilst they've been working at home, hang on a minute, actually, I am working myself to the bone and I'm not getting appreciation and I'm not getting job satisfaction. Or when I've been working with some of my clients, what I went through, what I noticed is we stay very silent at work. And what I mean is, we get on with all the tasks we need to do, but we don't express fully what we want. So we don't get the professional development that we seek. So one of the challenges that has come up, I've seen with a few women, is that some of the women have just been expected to get on with it at home. So how can you do that when you need to develop in your role? Why hasn't there been any mentoring or any support to thrive in that role? Not just the role itself, but the physical and mental support. And the reason I'm so passionate about that, Nicole, and I try and help my clients with that, is I feel like it's very, very important for us to express who we are. Because I have a psychology background. If we don't express who we are, how are we going to be happy at work? So I know that's quite a long-winded answer, but it's different for every client. It's not the same, so I don't want to put everyone in a box. But what I would say is that for most people, a lot of people are really thinking about shifting their careers because they've realized in the last 18 months that life is precious. And if we don't do something now to change, nothing's ever going to change. Not just for them, but for their children as well, I think. But yeah, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying things, but I hope it makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. And I think that's the big shift and the reset is entirely accurate. And actually, we were looking at one of your podcasts. It was the episode 40 where you talked to, is it Elaine? Can't pronounce her surname. Is it? Bartho. Okay. Yeah. I thought that might be it, but I wanted to double check. But you recorded that episode before lockdown, didn't you? But you filmed it before lockdown, but it was released in April. So it's April 2020. And you talk about dealing with burnout in the workplace. And I thought that was really interesting that you'd literally touched on a subject which you talk about quite a bit in writings. And it's very relevant to what you're talking about now as well, why people might want to shift and reset. But also then we had this incredible, literally the whole planet burned out pretty much, didn't it? I mean, there was a kind of systematic burnout of the population where everyone just had to stop and reset. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, myself included, realized that I was just running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and I couldn't do it anymore. Just no more, and that's talk about that burnout in the workplace and just your experience of releasing that podcast and at a time then that was everything that was going on.
So it's really interesting because I think before we recorded that, me and Elaine discussed that because it was just before the lockdown happened. And I actually did say that in the intro. And what is very interesting as well is just recently been featured in an article for Metro about the pandemic burnout, which I'm sure you're aware of because we've all been living through it. And when I mean all of us have it, doesn't matter what situation we're in. But in terms of burnout in the workplace, what I would say is a lot of the time we don't even realize we're going through the burnout because we're so used to working, ridiculous hours, maybe on weekends, maybe when we come home, if you have a work laptop, basically opening it up and, I'll just answer a couple of emails. And by the time you look at your watch, if you come home at 6, 7 o'clock, you're there till 9. If you're maybe single, you don't have kids, right? And what I'm finding when I'm speaking to the different women that come to me is that we've got different scenarios where you've got the mums who are trying to be caregivers, who are trying to be super women, versus the people who are on their own, who especially during lockdown, Nicole, what I found is that their work became their crutch, if that makes sense. So they actually were isolating
That makes
themselves.
a lot of sense.
Yeah. They were isolating themselves from their friends and family. So rather than, and because of Zoom burnout, I know we're doing this on Zoom, but what I mean is, like call after call after call after call. That was also burning them out. But burnout has been around for a long time. And I did an episode on the podcast where I primarily went through what burnout was. There's a gentleman in the 70s who came out with it called Herbert Frickenberg. I think that's his name. It's a very kind of long
You're much better
name.
with names than me, Soma. Well remembered. I never would have got that one in a minute.
I think it's something like that. But he's a psychologist that came up with it because what it was, like just before Wall Street and people working long hours, going back to the 80s here, I know it's a long time ago, but this is all linking with what I'm trying to say, Nicole, is that was when people started to work those ridiculous long hours. And people were not doing enough research in terms of science and in terms of health. My own father died from a heart attack after he became ill. He was a lawyer. And the thing is that some burnout is actually in-seated, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is you could become ill from another illness. He had a brain injury, and that can sit in with you for years, and then you pass away, or you can have strokes. So this isn't a new thing. And then if you look at countries like Japan, you've got the very kind of different cultures there where people are working basically extremely long hours. So burnout isn't new. And what my aim is to help my clients is to try and help them understand that, you can have balance, you can have portfolio careers, but because our society dictates that we must be at a certain job, we must do things a certain way, it's very difficult for people to come out of that mindset. And that's what I'm trying to do with my work.
That's amazing. I certainly I did take some time off during lockdown. I was part furloughed from my businesses, as were many, and I furloughed some of my team, and a lot of my team that are freelancers went on reduced hours. But being at home with my two children, young children, there was no off switch. It was literally, there was no off switch. And I don't know about your experience with your clients, but certainly since coming back into the workplace, it's difficult to know when the off switch is now. It seems to, it's sort of finding that pace again of work, coming out of it. So, I keep saying to people, it's like PTSD from lockdown, because it just feels like it. And it's just sort of adjusting to whatever this new normal is. And just your laptop or just being on your phone. I'm always being told off by anyone I'm with that I'm on my phone constantly. I'm not surfing Facebook. I'm normally working. I'm normally on WhatsApp or whatever working, and it's really hard to switch off from, actually. But it is important that you don't, like you say, burn out. But burnout is something. Certainly. How were people? What were people saying to you during lockdown? Then was that busier in lockdown, or I hate saying that, were you busier in lockdown? But the need is more, but different, I imagine. What were people saying to you that you were working with?
I think some of the conversations I was having when people were in lockdown, Nicole, were that people were feeling really, really overwhelmed how to handle the situation. Because I feel like burnout is one thing, but it wasn't just the burnout that was contributing to the burnout, weirdly. It was the burnout of missing family members. It was the burnout of, people that they couldn't see. It was the burnout of not having that, I don't want to say the word balance, but not having those boundaries between work and life. Yes. So time that you should be spending with, I don't have kids, but time that sometimes I should have been spending with my husband, I was noticing that sometimes he was really worrying about work at night. And when I was talking to my clients, there was a similar pattern, if they didn't have kids yet, where they were actually working themselves to the bone because they felt that other people were showing themselves up and doing a certain level of work. So I need to do the same, and I'm gesturing with my hands, but what I mean is there was almost this like inner competition going on. So you had that. The other things that were coming up was with some of the examples of when I was talking to women, they were feeling like they weren't having that mental health support. So if they were going through a challenging time, suppose they'd lost somebody, or suppose somebody actually did have COVID and they were in hospital for a long time, they were burnt out from running to and fro to the hospital and not being able to, give their work 100%. So there's lots of different scenarios, but I think the main thing is people not taking time to address that actually maybe even their job isn't the be all and end all of everything, you know? And I think that's sometimes hard for people to address, and actually realizing, you know what, I'm going to cut down my hours so I can spend more time with the children, or I'm going to cut down my hours and I'm going to start a part-time business. But it's a combination of things. There isn't one answer, but kind of different things, I would say. Yeah.
And I think that because I, as you probably know, but I do coaching. I coach clients, and it's been coming up recently that there's been a lot of people coming to me that I end up coaching, and they are doing exactly that. They're potentially working for other people still, but they also want to launch something of their own. And it's really nice that you're sort of allowing people to do more of that, to be more creative with their work style environment, because I think before they used to, you could do it, but it was almost a bit secret. If you worked for someone, you had to work for them exclusively, and then you couldn't, as long as it's all above board and it's allowed. But I've always been someone that's very happy that people are doing lots of different things. I'm not, I don't covet people and say I've got to work for me and they can't do anything else. But it seems to be more accepted since lockdown. We seem to be changing the way we work, and people are also, like you say, they're thinking, actually, I've got this skill set. How about if I use this a bit more for myself as well as for other people, which I think is great. All the more power for people empowering themselves. So is that when you say with jobs, that's coming up a lot more as well?
Yeah, definitely. It is coming up a lot more, but also people are taking breaks from their job. So what I mean is, I've worked with a few clients who've actually said, you know what, I'm going to switch off for a while and have a career break and give myself permission to have that break. Whereas before there was this guilt of, oh my God, no, I can't do that. That's really selfish. But I think people have changed their mindset around that, which is refreshing and nice to see. And I think it's important we do that. It's important we have breaks.
Okay, so this is interesting. If I was going to take a career break, I'm not taking a career break, but if I was going to take a career, I'm in on it after what you say.
Yeah.
What would you, if you're advising someone on a career break, is there a sort of specific time? Does it depend? I mean, I'm sure like with all things, it depends what the person's doing, how long they work, but is there like sabbaticals normally like 3 months? Travel the world. Is there a specific time that you would say is a good amount of time to take a career break? Because if I take a week off, I tried to take a week. I mean, I said I was closed in August. I wasn't closed in August. Every time I say I'm not working, I end up being pulled into something or doing something else. And because I have multiple businesses, I might be furloughed from one, but I'd be doing stuff on another one. There's no off switch. So what would be a career break for me today? How long would I need to take off to really assess my situation with you as my mentor?
I think it depends on the person. Some of the clients I've been working with who have been taking career breaks, it's actually something that they've made a decision on.
Okay.
With me as a careers advisor, my aim is to give everybody different options. So when I've been working with clients, I'm like, okay, career change, this is the option. Career break, this is the option. Quitting your job, this is the option. Is there a backup plan? I'm quite realistic. I'm not saying that, if you've got a mortgage and bills to pay, run away and, expect the universe to, I think that's I'm very realistic. And I think in terms of timeframes, Nicole, it depends. Like, it's funny what you're saying about August period, because I took about 2.5 weeks off and I kept on getting emails from journalists and clients. And I'm like, I'm meant to be off. And I was having to, not in a bad way. It's nice to be wanted. But I'm saying that we as business owners, that off button, if you're talking about business owners specifically, you have to have certain boundaries on where you put your working hours under your email, you do those sorts of things. But if we're talking about professional women, the particular gap that's needed, it depends on the trauma. And I'm going to use that word for a minute because it depends on the experiences that you've had in the past. What I've noticed, just to share with you, because I think this might help people, is that if you're a woman, I'm an introvert, right? I am actually an introvert. People get surprised by that. Is when I started in my career, and I was working as a careers advisor in schools, I would let a lot of things slip. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's okay. I'm not going to say anything, but that was awkward. And a lot of people get accustomed to not saying when somebody said something wrong or somebody's made them feel uncomfortable. So what happens after a period of time is if you're used to people treating you badly and putting up with it, let's just say you're being bullied or you're in a toxic workplace, there'll come a period of time where you need to take a break emotionally, physically, right, in your career. So if that's a year and you can afford to do that financially, and you may have support of a partner or savings, then that's great. But if you can only take, let's say, I don't know, 3 weeks, then you can take 3 weeks. There isn't any, I would say, rule that fits all. But what I would say is you need to have financial backing, because we need to pay bills. So, yeah. So when I'm giving advice and guidance, I'm always just trying to say to somebody, look, the break is just one option. But if you want to carry on doing, let's just say 2 days a week, freelancing or contract work, then you can do that. But make sure that you're not doing it whimsically just because of the sake of quitting your job, because that's not going to bring you any happiness or joy overall. But that's kind of what I would say, really, in a nutshell.
So you need to really have a proper, you need to really think about it. Is like,
yes.
And it's not just a question of, I'm going to take an extended holiday and take time off and then just come back and everything will be fine. You need to really think about your next steps, don't you? And plan.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to the mental health aspect, as I said, I know I'm talking about the trauma a lot, but it is really linked. You know, I took a career break a few years back, and I took a whole year off because I was then living at home. I wasn't married, you know, I was living a single life, so I could just like be with my mum and my sister, and it was nice. But I'm saying that as an example because, you know, you have a sense of freedom there where you're not worrying about the bill or the mortgage. But if you have a partner and you have kids, or you're a carer, there are different things there that you have to have in place, and you can't afford to take that time. So everybody, I would say, would need a different approach. But overall, what I would say is that if you are mentally burnt out, you need to have a plan, have some steps. Even, and I hope this is okay to share, what I would say is if it's really, really bad, like I was being bullied, I saw a counsellor. If you're in such a bad place where maybe you're facing racism, because unfortunately I've had clients come to me with stories like that, talk to a therapist or talk to somebody who's going to be able to give you extra support, Nicole, because it's so important. Yeah.
I mean, bullying in the workplace, it's a really, you know, and I mean, racism, anything like that's just awful. And I was talking to someone that has just started working with us recently, and she's a colleague of hers experienced it in a previous workplace, and it's just all, if you're not of that thinking, you just don't think it goes on, but it does. But with bullying, I remember certainly when I was in my early 20s, I always worked in a predominantly male environment. I was always in sales, a bit like the old boiler room, you know, and I had many good times, but there was, you know, for women, I mean, there was one place that I worked and there was literally a sales floor of men, probably 40, 50 men. And there was like maybe 2-3 girls, and that was it, 2-3 women. And there was bullying that went on. There was stuff that went on that you just sort of had to brush off. And I, you know, can remember one chap sort of really not being very nice to me at all, really making me very upset. And at the end, when he left, he turned around and said, well, actually, it's because I really liked you. And I was like, really? Well, you're going wrong there, mate, for starters, if that's how you go about showing a girl you like her. I mean, I've realised that now. It's good advice for my 9-year-old. I often say if he's been a bit mean, he might have a little twinkle in his eye for you. But, there's psychology behind that. But the actual bullying that goes on in the workplace back then, it was just, you just took it. I mean, it was just, you just really... There is more support now, isn't there? There is more. I mean, I would hate to see anyone being bullied in any way, shape or form, but there is more support now in the workplace, and isn't there? I mean, from a legal point of view as well, surely there's more we can do. There's HR companies that can step in and help and things like that. There wasn't so much of that back then, unless you're in a massive organisation. It certainly wasn't for us, for where I worked. What's your experience of that with sort of toxicity you talk about and bullying in the workplace?
So it's quite interesting because when I initially started talking about my bullying, I was actually very afraid to talk about it. I'm just being very honest because I'm quite honest anyway. When I mean afraid, I mean not afraid because of the bully or anything, but like I thought I would be judged a lot because I thought people would think, she's a bit of a wuss, you know. But it goes back to what you said, Nicole, about, you know, you take a lot of things, you kind of just like take it on the chin type thing. And when I was working in a school where I was bullied, what I noticed is this person bullied a lot of people. It wasn't just me. right? I could sense that. But I think in terms of the support, there are a lot of people talking about it. There's a lady that I'm connected to called Anima Kosha. I hope I've said her name right. And she has this wonderful forum called the Speak Up Collective, where she's encouraging people to talk about harassment at work, sexual harassment, bullying at work, all sorts of things. And it's just a forum where they talk about all sorts of things. It's brilliant. And she has a lot of experts on there from the HR field. She's a lawyer. And all these people coming together to do great stuff. And I've spoken one of her Clubhouse chats, and I really love the ambition that she has to try and, help. There is support, and there have been landmark cases where people have won bullying cases. But what I found, there was a really, really landmark case actually, I think with Black Rock, where there was a Muslim girl who was being really, really, really badly bullied in America, actually. And because she wrote this amazing article, BlackRock did some stuff, but at the time she was compensated, which isn't really the way to go about things. But I think it's all about maybe speaking up. And I think if you're in a position where you have a good HR team and you can speak up, that's great. But a lot of the time, what I found collectively when I'm having conversations with people about this, and I've had somebody come and they're being bullied, they either get moved to another department because don't want to cause a ruckus,
out of mind.
Yeah, or why don't you leave? And I've had somebody previously who I've worked with who it's come to a mediation thing, but they were blamed for it. So what I honestly have found is that we've still got a long way to go, but the fact we're having a conversation about it today is a step forward, Nicole. But also a step forward is that there are more people coming out talking about it. And I think, although it's still not illegal, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people like Anima trying to campaign for that as a lawyer, by the way. But we've still got a long way to go, is what I would say. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I'm not going to stop talking about it because as somebody who's been through it, and I wouldn't say I was worse, I would say I was not in a good mental state to tell anybody. And when I did mention it to my manager, she completely gaslighted me and she goes, "Oh, haven't you worked with a difficult person before, Soma?" And I'm like, "Yes, I have, but this is different. This is somebody really, really going for me. And if you're not going to listen to me, fine." And I left. So
to you for leaving, because that's, like you say, that is gaslighting. And it's also I think with bullying, to bullying there's things that I've done when I was a youngster that I'm not proud of, and I've apologized outright for behavior. But I was going through some really bad stuff when I was young. I was really not in a good place. So it said more about me than it did about anything else. But when you get to a point where you're 18 plus and you've got a job and an education, you would like to think by then you've really, because it does say more about the person than it does about the person that's being bullied. And the workplace and the environment that you're in has a duty of care to look after its employees or the people that come. If anyone comes into my place and they're not happy, or I've had people working with me before that say they're stressed out, they're not feeling it, I kind of figure it out before they do, because no one wants to see anybody unhappy. But toxicity and bullying is there's just no, in my book, there's absolutely no excuses for that whatsoever. And also there are some people that are bigger characters. I'm quite direct, but I'm always hopefully quite careful to say to people, I want to hear their opinion. I want them to talk up, because sometimes there can be overbearing people that slightly quieter people, more introverts. I'm an introvert, extrovert. So people can do that and they don't speak up necessarily. And they're, like you say, they're not able to voice their opinions. What can people that run businesses, and certainly sort of people coming back to work now, what can they do more to help this not happening? Or, what can I do as an employer to make sure that people have got a safe space here? Like, should I be sitting down, checking in with people more often? What would be your advice to people about that could help?
It's an interesting one, because one thing I'll just quickly mention before I answer that question is bystanders are also affected by bullying, by the way, people that witness bullying without realizing. I thought I'd just quickly mention that. But in order to answer your question, what I would say is that it's important to just see how people are behaving in the workplace. I was in a workplace once, but I was very quiet, and somebody came up to me and noticed I wasn't being bullied, but I was being excluded from a lot of things. So just somebody coming up and saying, Soma, you're okay. I didn't disclose everything, but I did just say, I feel like, this is an okay environment, but I'm just going to get on with it, like that kind of thing. And we had a conversation, a very brief conversation. So I would say for employers or anybody who suspects someone's being bullied or even left out, because that is actually a form of bullying, which people don't address.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
To see how people interact with people. Are they going to the pub after work for drinks? Are they being invited to the Christmas party? I know it sounds like really, really simple things, but these are things that have happened to not just me. Some of my clients have been excluded from those social events at work. They are not included. And that can be really, really, you can feel really, really like, okay, I'm working with these people every day. You're getting stuff off me because of my expertise, but you don't want to hang out with me, So having those kind of conversations, but also I would say keeping a lookout in general of how they are every day. Are they a bit quiet and subdued? Are they just putting their head down and working? Because I've seen that with a lot of people. Or is there a space where you're seeing someone taking credit for someone else's work? That's bullying, right? That happens quite a lot.
Yes, it does.
And also, has there been any situations via email or in a meeting where someone's blaming somebody for something and it's not actually their fault? So looking out for things is what I would say, and having conversations with everybody and just checking in that they feel safe and happy at work is what I would suggest.
Because like, as you're saying that, it's like, there's bullying that goes on in relationships, isn't there? And we seem to be getting more on top of that. And there's more laws coming up that are protecting us. But like you say, in the workplace, it's kind of can go under the radar, can't it? And exclusion is awful. I mean, that's just, that can be horrible for someone, especially if they're not someone that's sort of says, oh, I'd like to cut it. I mean, that can just get worse and worse and worse and worse, can't it? Where you just feel like you haven't got a voice at all. So that's really sad. I think that's great advice you've given. It's very interesting to cover that. The other thing that you talk about in another one of your episodes, I'd love to talk to you a little bit before we finish today, sort of talking about your experience of having a business podcast, but is your how, like, why failure can help to really, improve, just help your career, basically. Which I love the sound of that, but it's an interesting one, because I've talked about this a few times with a few people recently, where I've sort of said that my previous experience as an employee, not an employer, but sort of prior to a decade ago when I set up my first business, was that, everything, you just had to get everything right. I was a total people pleaser. I was totally like, everything has to be total perfectionist. I could do anything. I still do believe that a little bit, but I could just do anything, and I would do everything to the exclusion of myself and probably some around me. I'm sorry to say, that I'd possibly sorry to anyone listening that says, yeah, she was a bit of a workaholic. But the reason I'm saying this is because failure was not an option for me. I had a real thing about failure, and I learned from a few very inspiring people, entrepreneurs, that actually the more failures you have, the closer you get to success, because it's a great learning curve. And I've learned that in coaching as well, that not to be scared of failure and to embrace it. What's your experience about that? I mean, I just ask everyone to listen to that episode 69 podcast, because it's very good. But what's your feelings around that, Soma? I'd love to hear.
You know what? Failure for me is a subject that I really love talking about, actually. And I think, just to give a small example from my teenage years about failure to adulthood, is I was always the kid in the corner. I mean, this is my personality, so I'm owning it. Reading a book, wanting to write an essay in English, but I wasn't the kid who was very good with numbers. I was terrible, right? And I come from quite an academic family, so I felt a lot of comparisonitis. I felt a lot like, well, if I'm not good with numbers and science, oh God, I must be like a right failure. Like, what is wrong with me? And I actually struggled passing my maths GCSE. I had to take it about 3 times to get the C grade to go to uni. And I know that might sound like a simple example to begin with, but my experience with something like that is that when I eventually did pass it, I realized that when I was going to go to uni, when I was going to go to work, I was going to go through more failures. That was just the beginning. And I think in general, what I see with failure, and, I come from a South Asian background, so failure, is always seen as a not good thing. But I've been instilled with this value, because my mum's a primary school teacher, that, in order for you to learn, you have to fail. You're not going to learn anything. And I also think that it's made me more resilient in life. So I gave the example of the hacking and, I had to kind of pivot things. I think if that had been in the first year of my business, I could have easily given up, maybe. I could have easily thought, oh yeah, I'm going to carry on with this. I'm going to just be like that. But because I've done 4 years and I realized that failure is not failure, but that blip is teaching me something. No, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to carry on. The experience that I find with failure is initially the Career Happiness Mentor started as a business because I actually had a practice business just called SG Careers and Job Coach. And as I said, there wasn't really any niche. It didn't have the same kind of strategy this business does. And I was trying to cater to everyone. Marie Forleo always says, if you're trying to speak to everybody, you speak to nobody, right? That was the first business. That's her catchphrase.
You're a busy fool.
Yeah, that's her catchphrase that she uses, right? So I was doing that with my first business, and I realized, okay, that's just a complete app. So then I learned about niching. I learned about so much. And, I've invested a lot. I've had a lot of coaches. And I'm part of a lot of membership programs. Failure is something which I think we should all embrace it. And I think we should be teaching, I don't have kids, but if I did have a kid right now, I'd be teaching my kid about failure from day one. I know that sounds really intense, but when they're in school, I'd be saying, look, if you can't play that game, just keep on practicing, keep on learning, keep on making these mistakes. That's what I think failure is. And it makes you more resilient, Nicole. I've worked with young people and I've seen the disappointment on GCSE results day when they've got a D. And then I tell them my story about how I was told in school that I wasn't going to achieve anything. And I retook my maths GCSE and I got a degree and I got a postgraduate. It gives them hope. I know it sounds like a really sloppy story.
Not at all. Not at all.
Just to inspire them to think that just if you're told you can't do something, you can. Just be a bit stubborn. I'm a bit stubborn, okay?
But that's great. That's and like you say, just because you don't succeed at something the first time, so maybe there's more to learn. Maybe in all aspects of the world, maybe there's more to learn about that specific GCSE subject or business or approach or whatever, so that you do it better the next time. That's what I always find. That leads really nicely onto what I wanted to talk to you about as well, which is helping parents, because I would imagine you help parents, as you mentioned, GCSEs and that age bracket that my son's just started secondary school. So it's, it's a whole new world out there at the moment for me. My daughter's still at primary, but I would imagine this through lockdown has been really, really, as for everyone with parents of all ages, right? University, primary, secondary, but it's, what's it been like for helping people? I mean, they haven't done exams. What's going on? There's sadly been a lot of suicides. There's been a high rise in of that age group, where we sadly had someone locally who took his own life because he just didn't feel like anything else. There was no more future. It's massive. I mean, so there's that. What's your experience been of lockdown and dealing with these parents, helping parents and their children, but also, that's a great thing that you're doing. I'd just love to hear a bit more about that from you, please. Yeah, sure.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think last August, I start with last August because, you had the whole kerfuffle with the whole A-level results. Oh, what a nightmare, right? I felt so sorry for all the kids who were going through that. And I was interviewed for TRT World News talking about that a little bit and talking about what advice I would give. And the reason I'm mentioning the A-level specifically is because I already feel like there is a lot of pressure for people to go to university, for example. And A-levels, if you link back to failure for a minute, it's all about going to university and doing this and doing that. And there are so many different routes. So my aim also, Nicole, is to try and encourage people to do not necessarily apprenticeships, but to look at all the different options. But what's also been coming up is parents have been educating themselves, have been Googling things and looking at things like, but in a good way, it's good, because parents want to help their children succeed. And thinking, actually, maybe my son doesn't want to go to university, or my daughter doesn't want to go to university. Maybe, just maybe, they want to do a higher apprenticeship with A levels, or when they're looking at their GCSE options. I had a really wonderful young boy that I worked with who was so enthusiastic. I loved working with him and his mum and dad. And he had so many questions about what actually is the world of work like? What do you do at the office? So it sounds like a simple question, but I think it's those questions that kids need answering. They need to know what the working life is like. Also, I don't know what it's like in your particular area, but when I've worked in schools, work experience has been limited because there isn't enough government funding. So people have been trying to get work experience during lockdown. And that's been interesting for people because, some surgeries have been offering that, but there's been a lot of red tape around that. So how can you do that? So I think some of the issues that have been coming up is this worry about children's future. What is going to happen? What are going to be the jobs? Should they go to university? Should they do a higher apprenticeship? Should they just get a job? Should they start a business? And that's the other thing that has been coming up in some of my conversations with parents is that, why isn't there any information about entrepreneurship in schools? And I actually worked in a school where I tried to encourage more information about entrepreneurship, and they shut me down. They said, no, Soma. Yeah. They said, no, we have targets to meet. We want the kids to go to Russell Group University. And look, if that child is capable of going to a Russell Group University, I'm fine with that. There are a lot of kids who don't want to go to a Russell Group University. They want to learn. They want to maybe become a plumber or hairdresser. These professions are almost belittled. And we need to understand that every young person has a different ambition. There is no wrong or right. I know I might sound quite ambitious in that approach, but I feel like there's a lot of snobbery around university and not going to university. And that needs to stop. It needs to stop.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, look, my son is his dad and myself. We talked to him many times about this, and we're like, for us, we want him to do as well as he can in everything in life, so that he has as many doors open for opportunity for him. It literally is that, it's so that he can choose what he would like to do. And if that is going to university, fine. And if it's not, he wants to do something else. But it's not. I don't want him to limit himself because of lack of effort. And that doesn't mean that I'd put him to the grindstone, but opportunities, it's great. I wasn't taught that enough. I was like, well, you do it this way, you do it that way, and that's the only way. And I think exactly like you're saying now, the world is changing. There are many diverse things that you can be doing out there, as well as the more traditional careers that you don't necessarily need to go to university for. You can do apprenticeships with some amazing companies that we have as clients that have amazing apprenticeship programs, and it should not be frowned upon. And everything that is done on the planet has some purpose. Everything that we do. And I'd like to think that lockdown, when we all sort of showed support for the NHS and all these other services that have maybe not been given so much support in the past, we're all a bit more respectful of that. And so I think I love everything that you're talking about. I think it's brilliant. We're kind of coming up to the end of our chat. I mean, you do your podcast. You've done 100. I'm on about 30 episodes. I've only been going a little while. You started obviously 2019, so more credit to you. What do you love the most about doing your podcast, other than obviously covering all the? I mean, there's so many subjects. I think I'm going to have to talk to you again another time, because there's a lot more I wanted to talk to you about here. I mean, there's all sorts of things that I wanted to talk to you about here that I've not got to. So, but what's the thing you love about it the most, and what have been some of your sort of golden nuggets of wisdom that you've discovered doing podcasts for the last couple of years, Soma?
I think I really, really just love the aspect of meeting interesting people and having wonderful conversations with them. But also, I love the fact that there is a way for me to share information that's free. And I know that might sound cheesy, but as business owners, yes, we do need to pay the bills. I get it. We get that. But there are a lot of people that come to me, Nicole, who have just, especially when they lost their job in lockdown, or they were going through financial crisis, or they were on a break and they couldn't afford my services. The podcast is a really nice tool for them to listen to when they're going for a drive, going for a run, whatever it is. And I know a lot of people have said to me before, but Soma, it's free and you give so much value in one episode. But okay, but that's the point. The point is that I want my audience to get to know me, because that's the kind of person I am in real life. If somebody met me in real life, I would probably chat to them for a long time, because I do like to chat. But I'm just saying that for me, my podcast is part of my personality, part of my brand. And that's what I probably love the most about it. But I love all the amazing guests who've come on, because I've spoken about so many different things. And also, you know, it's not easy running a podcast, as you know, you're on one. But
yeah, it is. It's really easy. We just roll out of bed, just do this, and it's just it's out there.
Yeah, but that has almost made me more resilient to do it. I think consistency has been the key with the podcast. So I don't know, I really, really love doing it. And I know that we're doing this via video, but for me, it's a way of me almost being in my tricky bottoms and recording an episode, or, you know, it's just, I really, really just love the format. And I love the conversations that I have with people, and the fact that it gets listened to by people. And I'm adding value to people in a way where if they can't work with me, they've got that, you know?
I love that. Well, listen, I've had a fabulous conversation with you today. It's been great. I mean, there's so people, where's the best place? Is it the best place for people to find you on the website? Tell us where we can find you, more information about what you're sharing here.
Yeah, so you can find me at www.thecareerhappinessmentor.com. That's actually going to be rebranding very soon, in the next month or so. It's just going to be Soma Ghosh, still Career Happiness Mentor. That we were rebranding. But the best place to find me is on LinkedIn and Twitter. Those are the two platforms.
Great. Yeah. Amazing. Honestly, thank you so much. This is so interesting. I am thinking about a career break now. Maybe straight after this episode, Giles. No, I'm literally, honestly, I think the things that you've talked about are very, very interesting. And there was one last thing I wanted to sort of finish off on. You quote on your website about, is it Robert Half, who says 13% of employees are unhappy. They were unhappy in 2019. And 44% of unhappiness is caused by burnout, which causes anxiety and stress. Do you think this number has possibly gone up or down? What would you say?
Probably. I haven't had time to review that. Thank you for reading those stats. It probably has gone up.
It's probably gone up. No, the reason I'm pointing out is probably more people need to get in touch and have a chat with you, because it's interesting, isn't it? That those are quotes that were back in 2019, before we even went through what we went through. So it's even more important now, I think, that everyone addresses things and chooses a happier path, because we all, that's the one choice we all have, is the path we walk on. And it doesn't have to be an unhappy one. It might be unhappy, but you can make adjustments. And certainly with careers and our children, it's great to know that there's advice out there that we can get. So thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, I would love to talk to you again. Maybe we'll do a live careers assessment or something. I'll try great for myself. Well, have a wonderful rest of day, and thank you so much for joining us on the Big Chat today.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.